Hi, Pete.
Good afternoon, entrepreneurs, to another webinar in our series of weekly webinars. Today, I'm speaking to Carla Sage and Nick Kogos from Datafy.com. The subject we're going to be speaking today is the subject that comes up day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. When we pull the data of the most questions asked by the tour operators in our group, every single year, the number 1 and 2 subjects that are talked about most, number 1, OTAs, number 2, direct bookings. So these are the 2 most favorite subjects for maybe good reasons, maybe bad reasons. We'll find out that tour operators in our community of nearly 25,000 now speak about on a daily basis. So without any further ado, could I just ask you both to give us an intro of yourself and then crack on with the presentation?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Carla Sage. I am the Vice President of Advertising for Datafy and admittedly a former OTA employee. So we are looking forward to sharing some of our insights about how to target well on Google and Meta this morning.
Hey, good morning. I'm Nick Kogos. I'm one of the strategists over here at Datafy, and my background is mostly in the destination marketing organization, most recently based here in Colorado, but I've spent years doing everything from PPC, paid social, etc. I'm a Google partner, so spent a lot of time on the front lines in the digital advertising space.
Do you want to just crack on, Carla, and share your screen?
Sure.
All good. Right. That's great.
Excellent. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. I think if you run a tour or an activity or an attraction business, you know exactly how challenging it can be to sell tickets without having to hand over a large part of your revenue to middleman booking sites like Viator or Get Your Guide or Expedia. And so today we want to talk a little bit about how to use simple data sources to run smart, targeted, and profitable ads on Meta and Google. And our goal is to get guests booking directly on your website so that you can keep that money that you earn. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the online travel agencies or OTAs. They do bring in customers, but they can come at a really heavy cost. Very often they're taking 15 to 30% off of every ticket, which destroys your profit margins. They can steal your repeat business because after a customer finishes your tour, the OTA is going to email them and promote other local activities instead of sending them back to you. And we definitely see delayed cash flow there where they're holding on to your money for weeks, long after that tour date has passed. They're also going to hide real guest email addresses with temporary fake ones, so you can't build that long-term relationship with your customer. They're going to promote you side by side with similar and often low-cost providers, which increases the competition exponentially. And finally, their algorithms can negatively affect your viewability on those sites with no recourse or warning. So the bottom line is really that relying solely on the middleman is going to put your business and your profits at risk. Here's just a little bit of the math that's going to make all of this worth it. If you can just shift 25% of your bookings from that middleman site to your own website, it can completely change your business. Direct website bookings give you roughly a 97% profit margin compared to the heavily slashed margins from the OTAs. Plus, when guests book directly with you, you own their email and phone number, and I can't tell you how valuable that is to you. You can invite them back next year or for upcoming events or promotions, which is going to increase that guest value over time. So how do we find and reach our most profitable target audiences? There are many, many data sources out there that are available to you, but we're going to focus on 3 simple sources today and how you can put them to work. So the first source that we're going to look at is location data. And this is going to use anonymized mobile location signals to give us a clear picture of who travelers are, where they come from, where they're spending their time. And some of the more robust data and audiences can be provided by a vendor like Datafy, and some of it can be accessed directly in your ad platforms. And we recommend looking at 3 main areas to start. So the first is going to be the tourist hotspots hubs. So with this location data, we can actually see mobile devices that are gathering in real time or past visitors who visited places like local resorts, airport terminals, or cruise ship docks. We're also going to look at those points of interest. So we're going to look at other spots around town where tourists are spending time, like popular dining or entertainment districts. And then the all-important competitor zones. So we can even identify visitors who are currently physically located at or previously visited your nearby competing attractions or departure points. And this allows us to send advertising to these audiences that lets us put direct alternatives in front of people who are actively in market looking for things to do right now, and those who might be traveling to your city. So our second data foundation is going to be something that you already own, your contact lists. Your reservation and booking software is a goldmine of past guest information, and here's how to use it. You're going to export clean records. You're going to pull all of those guest emails, their phone numbers, and zip codes straight out of your booking system. This allows you to identify top spenders and segment out repeat guests or large family groups or people who purchased those premium experiences. And it will allow for seasonal re-engagement. So you can actually reach out to your past guests about 8 or 9 months after their last trip, right when they're starting to plan their annual vacation for the next year. And then the third source is also something that you own, which is going to be your website data. And all you have to do is place some simple tracking tags on your site, and then you can watch how people interact with your booking pages and your content, which can help you define your messaging and your targeting. So first, you're going to track specific page views so we can see who's looking at specific tours or pricing schedules. We can recover cart abandoners, so we can automatically capture visitors who selected dates and started that booking process, but then they dropped off or paying. And we can measure the level of interest. So we can look at the casual browser on your website versus that active shopper who's spent several minutes comparing prices or schedules. And that's going to be a more valuable target for you than that casual browser. And when we stack these data sources together, we can match the right message to the right person at the right time. So that location data is going to find current travelers, it's going to find past visitors, and it's going to find your competitors' guests. While your contact lists are going to let us build lookalike audiences of similar high spenders or family audiences or locals. And your website data is going to catch those cart abandoners before they leave town. And your customer database lets you target those local residents again with special staycation deals during slower periods. So to bring it all together, here's kind of what this is going to look like in practice across those ad platforms. You can combine that location data and geofencing on Meta and Google to show ads like top rated activity near you today or book direct and save 10%. You can target local residences using the zip codes and your CRM records on Meta and Google with a more neighborhood message like local neighbor pass or special weekend discount for families. And then you could also look at those warm website visitors. And so these are people who left your site without buying in the last 14 days. And we can run retargeting ads to them that say things like still planning your tour and secure your spots before they sell out. So I'm going to hand it off to Nick here. He's one of our strategy specialists, and he'll walk you through how to use the data sources and audiences in running those Meta and Google campaigns.
All right, thanks, Carla. I appreciate it. Do you want to just keep the slide going? Oh, okay. I'll share
Sorry.
my. Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. I got it. Okay, everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, appreciate it. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the more specifics about how to actually do this, how to use your audiences to create targeted campaigns to increase your bookings. So taking what Carla talked about, there are three main ways that you can utilize your data to serve ads in Facebook and Instagram. The first is you can import all of the data directly into Meta and create audiences that way. You could think of all these data sources like your past visitors over the last 6 months, or particular seasons, your email lists, your sales or group customer lists, etc. As long as you have contact information, you can create and utilize that list in Meta. The other type is going to be website or app traffic. That's where you can advertise to past visitors, as Carla mentioned, to your website, or people who have interacted with specific pages, or the entire site or your entire mobile app as a whole. And third, you can take those two audience groups and create what are called lookalike audiences from that data. So that's going to expand and broaden your list to add in new individuals who are similar to your list, but not directly in them. Okay, so the first way, getting into more specifics about that, the import audiences, the benefits of this are, you're not just buying eyeballs, random people. These are your visitors, your customers, your leads, super low funnel, high intent individuals. You can utilize all different types of lists, as I mentioned before, past visitors from your data providers, buyers list, emails list, sales list, tour, trade show lists. I mean, think of all the possibilities of what you can utilize your lists for. And then you can actually narrow down your list by applying additional targeting options like locations, interests, behaviors, that type of thing. So for example, if you have a giant list of all of your previous visitors from last year, you can narrow that down to only target specific locations right within Meta. It's really easy to do that. Next, the website or app traffic, that's another type of audience that you can build directly right within Meta. It takes a little bit of setting up, like Carla mentioned, with installing a pixel on your site. From there, you have to define kind of the rules, we like to call it, of who you want to serve ads to. For example, do you want to put everyone in the group that visits your homepage, or people that completed a booking or did not complete a booking? It takes a little bit of time to get those buckets set up, but once it's all set up, it's super powerful to use. And then from there, what I always like to say is, if the content is truly different between those different pages and those different groups, think about how to serve different ads to those different groups. So the example I'm going to give is, if you group all your visitors together with kid-friendly activities, is that content going to be different than couples packages? Do you want them seeing the same ads? Probably not. So think about what types of visitors you clump together with your website revisiting, and figure out what type of content they need to be seeing. And once you've got all the data uploaded into Meta, you can then expand the audiences by creating what are called lookalike audiences. So Meta is going to scan the profiles of all the people that are in there and find similar individuals to those audiences that you've uploaded. You get kind of a slider to use of a 1 to 10%, which is really cool, because 1% will find people that are most similar to your audiences. And then as you increase that percentage, it gets bigger and broader of an audience. But regardless of what type of lookalikes you're going to build, make sure that you keep them grouped together with your original audiences, or keep them separate altogether. And what I mean by that is, you don't want one lookalike audience from this original audience to be running with a different type of lookalike audience right here. So you don't want them to conflict each other. You don't want different audiences that have nothing to do with each other running with each other. And looking into some best practices, for one, you've got to have a clean list before you upload. And what I mean by that is, you can find guides for this all over the internet. You need to have at least an email address or a phone number. The more information that you can have, the better. But you need to spend time kind of building and cleaning up that list before you're uploading it. And that means, removing duplicates, or a lot of people use, dummy email addresses or placeholder fake names, that type of thing. So just make sure the list is all cleaned before you upload it into the system. And then build a full funnel approach and exclude between your lists. And what I mean by that is, think about how you're going to push people down from people who have, who are super high up in the funnel, and people who have already booked. Can you get them to book a different experience? So making sure that you have all of those lists kind of on their own, and you're serving the correct ads to those different groups. And continuing with that, make sure that those audiences are receiving the right messaging. So going back to my example of the family friendly and couples activities, make sure that those family friendly activities, those individuals are seeing the right messaging and creative in the campaign. So in general, everyone likes to know, like, okay, how much is this going to cost? Give me the numbers behind it. So in general, I would recommend using 60% of your daily budget across using them on your import audiences, 30% on your web and app retargeting, remarketing audiences, and using 10% of your budget to expand those audiences with the lookalike audiences. And as you can imagine, there's 100 different ways that you can utilize these audiences within Meta. Just some examples or some ideas that we can throw out there are, creating past visitors lists based on season. So can you try to convert a visitor who booked something during the summer? Can you serve them winter ads and trying to convert them into a winter visitor, or vice versa? Another thing, Carla mentioned this before, but locals versus residents. So, locals versus visitors. So too often I see these two grouped together. But if you have a locals list of people who are within your destination or attraction, you can serve them different messaging. Think local discounts or staycation promotions. Very different type of messaging and ad than your visitors who are outside of the location. And another idea is to think about high funnel versus low funnel. So prioritize, your greatest hits content for new visitors who might not have been to the to the attraction, but have signed up for an email list. Serve them the best of the best content. And then the people who have come time and time again, try to give them a little bit different type of messaging to convert them and have them do a different type of activity. More niche type content. All right, so getting into Google advertising, similar with some things to Meta, but different than others. In general, you'll see, you're going to see, the import audiences and the web and app traffic. Those are really the main ways to tap into your audiences, and then tapping into your YouTube channel with your subscribers and people who have interacted with your channel. So looking at the import audiences, probably a lot of similarity between this and Google. As you can see, you're going to utilize your own data by building those custom audiences just directly in Google's Audience Manager instead of Meta. And so similar to Meta, you can utilize all different types of lists. That can be buyers list, email list, sales list, trade shows, etc. The one key difference that's actually really nice about Google is there is an automated connection available through a lot of your data sets or your POS system directly. You just kind of have to connect those to Google itself, and then you can import the data directly from that. It's worth exploring. There's a ton of different sources that you can connect directly, so I definitely look into that. Another key difference between Google and Meta is they're a little bit more picky about the types of lists and information that they allow in the system. You will have to provide a little bit more information than just an email address and a phone number like Meta. A lot of times you'll need a zip code or country or even first and last names. But once you're in, the Google their tools are so robust and crazy with the amount of tools and options that they have in the inventory available. But you just got to get those audiences in there first. Web and mobile app traffic, a little bit different than what you can build within Meta. If you have Google Analytics 4 or Google Tag Manager, you can set those up directly within the system. It just connects them right together. And then from there, you can set up all of the URL rules right within Google And it's just a super easy system. It's a lot easier than Meta's system of building remarketing groups for your website. And then, as I mentioned before, consider the type of content that you're going to be seeing, that the audiences are going to be seeing. How different is that kid-friendly activities group versus that couples? Try to think about that. And then last, tapping into your YouTube audience. So Google owns YouTube, so you can directly tap into that channel by creating audiences from individuals who have directly interacted with your channel or your videos. For organizations that have active YouTube presence, this is really a game changer. The big difference between so that's YouTube's connection directly within the system. A big difference between Meta and Google that is worth mentioning is that there is a limited availability as of right now with their lookalike audiences. They're only available for what we call the demand generation campaigns, which are kind of a mixed bag of ads like YouTube, Gmail, Google Discover ads. As it stands right now, they're not available for search or display campaigns, but I did look at this, and according to Google, they're going to be opening up lookalikes into all their different advertising products in the next later this year. Looking at best practices, very similar to what you're going to see with Meta. I would spend more time with Google Ads and cleaning up your audience list, making sure everything is good to go. That's going to be your biggest hurdle, is getting the audiences to be accepted within the channel. So spend some time making sure that there's not going to be any hiccups there. And then, as I mentioned with Meta, utilize a full funnel approach if you can, and exclude those lists between each other, make sure there's no overlap, and then make sure your audience is aligned with your messaging and creative, and vice versa. So looking at the budget type, because there's really the budget by type, because there's really not a robust lookalike option like Meta, we're going to increase the website traffic to 40% from 30%. And then keep your import audiences at 60%. So a couple of other things to consider with Google and Meta as a whole is creating a negative keyword list and include words like free, jobs, Wikipedia, salary, or in my case, since I come from the DMO world, Durango, Colorado is very different than Durango, Mexico, which is very different than Durango, the car. So making sure that you have different types of keywords that are added as negative keywords, so people are searching for the right things and ending up looking at your products and not Durango, Mexico, or the car. Prioritize mobile device bids in both your targeting and how you think and build creative. For example, with your vertical video ads that you might be running, are people watching your videos with sound, or are they relying on you to provide captions for those videos? And in addition, think about scheduling your campaigns during open hours. So if people have, questions and want to contact a human, you're available when they see those ads to answer any questions that they might have. And with that, I'll kick it back to Carla. Carla, you there? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So as we start to wrap this up a little bit, I wanted to remind you to not forget that getting people to your website is only half the battle. Your website has to make the booking process effortless, or all of the work that you just put into this advertising and targeting will be lost in the drop-offs. So just a couple of quick tips. Ensure that your guests can pick a date and check out on mobile in under 60 seconds. Display clear refund and weather policies right next to the pay button so they feel really confident in their purchase with you. And then make sure that you've enabled Apple Pay and Google Pay so that people can check out with a touch of a finger instead of trying to enter a 16-digit credit card number on their phone. And then finally, just to bring everything together, I want to look just quickly at what this strategy actually means for your bottom line. When you weigh direct bookings driven by smart guest data against those traditional OTA channels, the financial contrast is really going to be night and day for you. And I would point out again that the OTAs are great for filler traffic, but when you run these targeted Meta and Google campaigns using that data that's available to you, and a lot of it that you actually own, you aren't going to pay that 20 to 30% commission to a middleman, which is going to increase your net profit on every single ticket sold. And that is really the goal. So that was kind of it. Yes, we have a picture of John Marshall here. He would be your contact at Datafy if you're looking at anything on our side or have questions about any of this. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions about what we talked about today, I think we can open it up.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Carla. Thanks, Nick. And welcome, John. So I've got a small mountain of questions, but if anybody's listening into this live, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little question mark. If you click on it, it will open up a question and answer session. If you put your question in there, 100% I will see it and I will ask the audience for it, the panel for an answer. So I've got a lot of questions, not unusually to do with OTAs and direct booking. So as I started this saying OTAs direct booking are the number one and the number two discussion points with tour operators year in, year out. That gives us a paradox that so many, and I would say so many as in the majority of tour operators, struggle to make digital marketing, digital advertising actually work. So we have a paradox that it's their number one and number two discussion point, but then they really struggle to make it work. Why do you think that is?
I think OTAs are just easy to use. And so there's something nice about being able to hand off the work of digital advertising to someone else and kind of allow them to run that. And OTAs do a good job of selling tickets generally. I think the challenge, which is what we kind of focused on today, is really that you're giving away so much of your hard-earned money to the OTA. And a really important piece of that is losing that guest relationship that you have. And so I think dedicating some time to figuring out how to do this. And Facebook and Google are intended for the average person to be able to use them, both for scrolling and doom scrolling potentially, but also for advertising. And so I think it can be a little bit intimidating if it's not something that you've done for yourself in the past. But there are thousands of training videos out there and really guiding people in some of the most simple ways to make a really big impact on the outcomes. And so if you take the time to learn a little bit of it, you don't have to be a pro at it. You don't have to be myself or Nick by any means. And I would very much encourage people to take the time. And I think your time is worth that 20 or 30% commission that you're handing away.
Yeah, I think that piece that Carla just said is the most important on two levels. I think that where the difficulty comes in outside of the ease of using the OTA is a little bit of, it can be imposing to jump into Meta and Google and decide to try to create a campaign. Most tour operators, I'm sure most tour operators on right now are small business owners. There are people who it's one person who's doing the job of 12 people and trying to figure it out all at the same time. And I think that can be very daunting. I think that Carla and Nick did a great job presenting some of the simple kind of easy entry ways. But I think it's also hard when I've been on these been on these calls as a small business operator. And I've attended, 7 of these workshops over the course of 2 weeks, and everything starts to blend into each other. And you start to feel very confused. And then, somebody comes on LinkedIn and says, I'll charge you $1,000 to set up these ads for you. Right. We've all kind of been in this space before. And so I think the lack of, ability or that instant knowledge, and then the lack of the ability to trust somebody with the budget that you've spent all this time, like building up that revenue and that profit so that you can have a budget to reinvest into marketing. It's hard to trust somebody with that when you've been burned a few times.
So between the two of you there, you used the word easy 5 times. And I think that is it. We're all human, it's human nature. people default to easy. OTAs are easy to use. The bookings come in. The thing I always, and I do push back to the operators, I've yet to come across anything in life that was easy, that was worth building. So if you're focused on easy, you're on shifting sands, and those sands will suck you up and spit you out somewhere you don't want to be at some point. If you're going to actually treat your company serious and you want to build something that's resilient and want to build something that's going to survive the ups and downs of tour operating and travel, which, as we all know, are severe ups and downs. They're not just little waves. They can be tidal waves that we've experienced. You've got to build for resilience going forward. The other point I would make, and this is based on the data I've seen over the last year, nothing we're discussing here is new, but I would argue it's become more important for the simple reason people are losing not 1%, not 2%, but I'm seeing losses of 10, 20, 35% of visibility and discoverability on Google. So if your traffic's down, and most operators that have audited this last year, their traffic is down significantly, their destinations traffic may physically be up, but the traffic to their digital platforms is down. You then have even more importance on mastering this stuff that's always been important for the last 10, 20 years. There's a question come in from one of the audience. Any suggestions for a new company with few existing clients on how to target ads?
Nick,
Yeah, I can. Yeah, totally. So, I mean, the first thing you could do is really open up your audiences and create something based on. I mean, you probably know where a majority of your bookings come from, where the visitors are. So, I would utilize what we call the in platform audiences. So, like the different targeting options for, like, I want to target the Denver area with these ages, and then go that way. And then as you start building a client list, just keep updating that list and keep injecting it into the systems over and over and over. So it's kind of a slow game to play, but it's not that hard to utilize the internal tools within Meta and Google if you don't have an audience list.
Yeah, I agree. That excellent insight, Nick. I think it kind of starts when you're building your business is who's your ideal customer profile, right? Before you even start, who is the person that you envision coming to visit you and go on your tours, and start to build that out on the different platforms. If you know that you'll be getting a lot of locals, start to really think about where you live and where where people live that would want to do the thing that you're trying to promote. Leverage your DMO and CVB. And any attraction friends you have, who are the top 10 visitors domestically? What are the top 10 countries? Where is the visitation generally in the area coming from? So I think the more you can kind of get inside the head of who you want your visitor to be, just dig in. And there's lots of different checkboxes in Meta and Google to try to get the person you want, and just play around. And like Nick said, don't be scared to fail. Fail fast and move on and try out a bunch of different audiences.
I would also point out that it's important to not just think about who you want your visitor to be, but also to be realistic about who your visitor is. And you're going to be able to figure that out based on those past guest lists and that website traffic, and really taking a look at who's actually buying your product. And sometimes that can be a little bit different than who you think. So you want to use those lookalike audiences or prospecting audiences or something like that to build those new kinds of visitors. But don't forget, you kind of have already a really good picture of who your current buyer already is and who to target in that scenario. I'm sorry, Nick, you were about to say something.
Oh, no, and adding on to what everyone's talking about is, in my experience, actually build out a picture of a profile for these people. Sketch them out. What does, my Amy the Alabama person look like? What do they wear? What are they into? What types of activities do they like? And stick that guy up on the wall. So when you're building your advertising, creating content, you're looking at Amy in Did I say Amy? Amy in the face. And so you have a person that you're looking and advertising to right there.
Peter, could I go back to something that you said really quickly?
Sure.
This loss of traffic that's happening on Google. Everybody is feeling it. So you're not out of the ordinary, certainly, if you are feeling it yourself. But I will say, tour and activity operators have a benefit that destinations and DMOs do not have. So DMOs are really feeling this loss of traffic at a high rate these days, and working really hard to try to combat that. One of the reasons DMOs are feeling that so heavily is because of these ads that Google has allowed to sit above Google search results, which are these tour and activity ads. And so you have a real opportunity to get to the top of those search results that you didn't have before if you're investing a little bit in that advertising. And the reason those don't work for DMOs is that you can only run ads in that space if you have a booking engine tied to your tour or your event or your activity or whatever that is. And most DMOs don't have that capability directly on their website. So they're having to scramble a little bit harder, and they're getting pushed a lot further down the list. So if you're willing to invest a little bit of time in this, you have an opportunity to be at the top of those results that you didn't have in the past. So it's definitely something to look at.
That's through Google Things to Do, yes. So we have another question here from a Greek operator, specifically Santorini. They're saying that ads in Santorini are particularly expensive for travel industry, probably due to concentration and being quite a famous destination. So the question is, OTAs are not even easy there because it's oversaturated and they have expensive ads. Now, I'm going to embellish this question a bit more because I think this is important. We tend to speak in general terms, but we have so many different operators doing different types of tour. And a tour could be 30 euros or $30 or $150 or $250, 250 euros. So different prices of tours result in different margins that allow you to have different marketing budgets. So how do you think about, depending on what your product, not necessarily what the product is, but what the price point is, the margin you're making versus the competition for that product in that destination? I mean, is it realistic that some products just cannot have a marketing budget, whereas other products certainly can?
It's a loaded question, I think, Peter. I think especially if you have those lower margin products or those lower ticket price products, it makes what we talked about today even more important for you, especially when it's oversaturated like that, and you just don't have any control over when or how or to whom the OTA is going to serve your ad. It just makes sense to concentrate on where you have the control of where and when and how much you're willing to pay for an ad, and have so much more control over your audiences. And you can come in at lower budgets than those OTAs are going to charge you. But I don't think anybody's necessarily completely out of the mix. You just have to be a little more creative about being in the mix, I think.
Yeah, when I was doing all other stuff myself, the way and not everybody's able to do this, but certainly the way I certainly got around it is on my day tours, I never advertised, or no advert would look like I was trying to book one or two people. They were all targeted at groups, for groups. A side effect was we did get bookings of 1 and 2 people. But if you're getting a group of 15 booking a $75 tour, there's a much bigger advertising budget there than 2 people buying it. But as long as your landing pages make it very clear that 2 people can also come, you get click-through, even though you're targeting a different market. Whereas if you spend money just looking for that booking of 2 people, it can be really, in my experience, it was really difficult to justify the cost of Google ads and Meta ads for just 2 people. But the minute you change the dynamics of what you're doing, it makes it a bit more. So sometimes it's just a a different way of thinking about how you go about things. Something you both mentioned it earlier on who the customer is. And again, I found this when I was operating. I could find certain customers where I could get ads to perform like nobody's business. I was printing cash. Other customers who were still my customers and target customers, I really struggled to make ads work. Examples. If I was targeting locally, and when I say local, that would be the whole of the UK, either for day tours or multi-day tours, I could make ads work, no problem whatsoever. They just printed cash. I was speaking the same language, I could get the better reach, I could get the better conversion, all that stuff. If I started saying, right, I now want to target people on the west coast of America to come to my operation in Spain, that became a much, much harder task than tasking customers who were local.
I think you have to look at your budget breakout when you've got something like that, and it's very clear who's paying your bills, or who's allowing you to target those audiences. I think the challenge is always, if you don't put money into that audience that isn't today paying for themselves from a marketing perspective, then you're not going to grow it to the point where they are paying for themselves. So you've got to have a little bit of investment in there, but then you've got to pay your bills. And so I think that really comes into your budget allocations and how much are you willing to put into, because I would imagine that you're also seeing a much smaller audience just in general, from the US. And so it's not going to pay for itself probably ever in the same way that UK audience is paying your bills. However, it could be where you're reaching them. How many of them are booking in advance? Do you have an opportunity to reach them when they land at the airport, or when they're at some of these other locations, or doing some of these other trips or tours or activities along the way? Do you have that opportunity to reach them at that point? And maybe that's a better spend than trying to spend those dollars in the US, convincing them to build an entire trip to come over.
I think that also leads into what we've discovered over the last couple of years, because we ask the same question at every in-person event we do with operators. So this has now been asked to thousands and thousands of operators. I always ask, how many partners have you got? How many sales partners? Mm-hmm. And it's normally, when I say normal, over 90% of the answers is under 5. It's under 5 partners. It's rare we find someone, it's in single figure percentage if we can find someone with 30 or more partners. And again, I got around that challenge trying to target multiple different customer personas in different locations by using the partner network for the ones I wasn't good at, or the ones that were costing me too much money to market. So the partner network wouldn't just be built by, oh, we can have another partner. It's that partner is good where I am not good. So even if we look at the global big dominant partners like OTAs for me were to bring in international clients that I wasn't that good at targeting because I found it expensive and the conversion rate wasn't great, whereas they would bring them in as fillers. And I judged whatever fee I was paying then. It's not the fees people pay now, but it was a fee. It was certainly worth it because I was going to spend way more trying to get these. So this is just the point I'm getting across here. It's not one or t'other on all of this. It's really prioritizing who your customer is, where your customer is, who's paying the money now, as you said, Carla, who's potentially your high revenue customers going forward, and who's the partners that's going to enable you to do all that. Because back to one of my first questions, it's unusual for it to be the operator on their own. They're going to have either partners of distribution partners, sales partners, or technology partners, marketing partners, because all of this stuff has become quite complex over the years, and not many operators have unless they've got a team, not many operators have the depth of time to be able to master this stuff.
I think, Peter, that's a really good way to break out how you're going to allocate those budgets. And by no means am I saying either the OTAs serve a very specific purpose. But so in your example, if I put my Meta and Google dollars into that UK audience, now I'm getting exponentially more out of that audience because I'm not paying the OTA 30%, and I'm already doing a great job with that advertising. That's where you start to think about allocating those dollars. And I think it makes a lot of sense to hand off some of those more challenging audiences to the OTAs, where they do have that opportunity to reach them easily and well, and then make those exponential benefits off of those audiences that you're reaching already really well.
A question that comes up all the time when we're discussing this, and it's one of those questions I always answer with a question, and it's not me being annoying like I normally am. Operators always ask me, what budget should I put to this? And that's a piece of string, because we have so many different types of operators with different products in different destinations. The question I always go back to them with is, what's your current cost of acquiring a customer? And if you don't know what your current cost of acquiring a customer is, no one can advise you on what your budget should be. So there is work even before you start doing any of this that has to be done pre. And I would suggest one of the critical parts is finding out how much you are actually spending to acquire a customer. Because although everyone's saying OTAs 30% is expensive, and I think it is. For me, that was ridiculously expensive. I would never have paid it. But for a lorry operators, it may not be expensive unless they understand what they're actually paying to acquire direct customers.
Yeah, I agree completely. You really have to know, because you don't want to spend more marketing budget than what you're bringing in either, right? And I do think controlling some of that through running some of these campaigns like Meta and Google that give you so many opportunities to come in at low levels. I think that's another benefit of Meta and Google, where with OTAs, to run the separate advertising with them can be wildly expensive. It's sort of a different business model than the ticket sales and them taking the commission on that. But you can really control a lot of that with the Meta and Google. So it gives you an opportunity to come in at some low levels while you're figuring that out. What is it really costing me to get? And frankly, I'll go back to the example that you use. It's probably costing you a whole lot less to get that UK visitor than it is to get that US visitor, right? And so maybe that 30% makes sense in that scenario, or your time also has value. All of those things should play into this, not just, how much marketing budget do I have, but where did that come from? What did it take me to earn it? And am I going to make my money back on that? And I think you have to calculate all of that into it. And so starting really kind of low level with Meta and Google gives you an opportunity to delve into that without spending $30,000 a year.
Yeah, I was speaking with an operator the other day, and they were complaining. It wasn't a day operator, it was a multi-day. When I give you the numbers, you'll understand why. They were complaining they were spending anywhere between $230 and $300 acquiring a customer, and they weren't pushing hard because they were looking where to cut back rather than invest. But they then told me their average retail price was around $5,000, and their average booking was $2,000. So there's $10,000, and I'm like, but so if you're paying like $200, $300 to get $10,000 worth of booking, and your average multi-day margin's about 35%, that is not a complaint situation. I should be spending way more.
That's working at that point. That's what you should be doing. I think the other thing when you talk about cost of acquisition is you have to bring in the loyalty piece of it all, right? Especially if you have a product, if you're a tour operator and you sell 10 tours and you do really well with locals, how many times can you get those people to come back? If they come through an OTA, you're never seeing them again, right? You're just become commoditized in their algorithm and maybe get fed something else locally. But when you have their first party information, that what you're making off a customer, instead of that, in this example, instead of that $5,000, that over the lifetime, that customer may be worth $35,000 to you if you're able to execute it again and again. So at that point, that $235 is invisible, right? Like that doesn't even matter anymore if you've been able to get 5-6 bookings out of them.
Yeah, the worst customer in tourism is a tourist, which again annoys tour operators when I say that, because for many of our operators who deal with inbound, a tourist is a tourist who only visits once. They come to Denver once, they come to San Francisco once, they come to wherever it is in the world once. So the lifetime value of that customer can be incredibly low, as in it is the one booking. Therefore, how much investment you're going to put into regenerating wealth out of that customer. There's a referral system you can obviously use on it, but we do have a lot of our membership who are exposed to tourists. I wouldn't say that's a digital marketing issue. I would say that's a business structure issue. I certainly wouldn't want to build a business that is 100% exposed to tourists. It's just too difficult. It's as simple as that. It's a really difficult market. But again, as well as figuring out, this goes back to who your customer is. It always goes back to who your customer is. It's not just what you can pay to acquire them, but that lifetime value. And if there isn't a lifetime value, well, that changes what you're willing to pay for them. Completely changes what you're willing to pay for them. Moving on from actually what we're willing to pay and how we budget this stuff, I've always found location data really interesting, because I don't think it's things operators have from any of the tools. They don't actually have location data. They're not plugged in like hotels and DMOs where they're getting all this location data. Who's in the destination? Who's in the destination when? What are those people doing in the destination? Particularly for day operators who are getting last minute booking. So could you cover location data and how it can be useful and how tour operators can plug into it more?
There are some ways to use it in the platform where you don't actually have in the, like in Google and Meta, where you're able to look at exclude locals and target just visitors in a particular area. In those cases, you're not getting the data on that, so you don't really know where they came from or how much time they're spending in town and that kind of thing. I think, John, do you want to talk a little bit about our product and the opportunity that comes from something like a Datafy type source, where you're getting a lot of that information before you're putting dollars into targeting and audiences and things like that?
You're on mute, John.
Oh.
There we go. Yeah, I think, Peter, it's the one question you've asked so far where we kind of have to get a little salesy in the response, because I think at that level you kind of have to work with a party with an organization like Datafy, who has a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of data and a background of running with it. We're receiving mobile location device from our data panels across the entire United States, and we own the data, so we're able to manipulate it and really pull key strategic audiences out of it for people, and we're able to match that along with nationwide credit card data. And when you have those insights along with the booking insights and the first party data that tour operators are able to provide, and you have a very strong team like Carla, Nick, and everybody else on our team that knows these platforms really well and knows the data really well, we're able to perform really high quality, really strategic platform campaigns. I don't think that that's something that the average tour operator would be able to do just like by themselves. You really need to work with someone who, in most cases, you'd have to work with a data broker and then a marketing person, and then maybe somebody to visualize the data for you. And in the example of Datafy, we actually do all three under one umbrella.
I agree with you. It's incredibly complex, and I never ever mastered using location data as well as I should have. There is some really simple things you can do though as a tour operator. And this is going to sound ridiculous because it's so simple, but I don't see tour operators doing it. If it is really sunny on any given day and your product shows up better when it's sunny, I was an adventure operator. We were in water a lot. So if it was a nice sunny day and we put out live reels of people having fun in the sun, our bookings for the next day would go through the roof. If it was a horrible day, we were not sticking out live reels of people with horizontal rain or sleet coming to them. we would be showing stuff that was undercover. We would be showing archery or paintball or something that we had more protection from the weather. So depending on what your actual activity is, where your destination is, you've got to put some thought through. And the way I always used to think about it is these last minute bookings are sitting at breakfast in the morning or the night before for the evening meal, thinking, what are we going to do next day? They haven't landed in the destination all planned up, thinking I'm definitely going to do this museum tour, this walking tour, this food tour. They're sitting there thinking, I want to do something. And all of these other influences are influencing what they're going to do. And you've got to try and double guess that if you're going to drop ads on them on a location basis. And we used to drop ads on certain geographical locations because we knew our potential customers were there. But we were trying to take all the other signals as well to make sure the ad represented an influence point over the customers. Did that make sense, or was I off on a wander?
No, it did. It makes a lot of sense. As someone who used to work for an observatory, right? That's a business that is very clearly influenced by what the weather looks like. And I just came from working at a museum, Mercer Labs in Lower Manhattan, and it was the opposite. We would drop ads when it was raining because we knew people would want a place to come inside. And that just goes back down to your content strategy, right? For all of these different kind of scenarios that you're talking about, Peter, you need to have, and all these, and the audiences that Nick and Carla talked about before, you just need to have this content cut up and curated in so many different ways. And I think sometimes people think they have enough content. You might have, I have 15 pieces of content, 20 pieces of content. But to your point, if it's just 2 people in every picture and it's just sunny because everybody thinks it's nicer to be sunny, that content's not as flexible to be used in different scenarios as you would want it to be.
So I
would also say, Peter, there's a lot of opportunity in different platforms to actually set up, put a little bit of budget aside and say, okay, only serve these ads when it's raining, only serve these ads if the sun is shining, and only serve these ads during whatever time of day and that kind of thing. So there are ways to be very strategic about that as well. That doesn't require you climbing out of bed at 5 a.m. to post something about a sunny day or if it's raining outside or something like that. So you can really kind of plan ahead. I love the idea of those live, like these people are out fishing on the boat right now, you should be doing this too, kind of thing. There's a lot of opportunity with that. But if you don't have that kind of time or even that kind of expertise, you can set these things up in advance.
So there's a question coming from David Garcia, who I know quite well. He's finding it really difficult to work out his cost of acquisition due to all the different channels. Website, he's got website customers coming in, direct Meta. He's got Google when he's doing Google ads. He's got B2B partners, and he's also got OTAs. I am tempted to say there's a new technology being invested called a calculator for David, but maybe I better not be so sufficient on that. So any advice for David on how does he split down all these different channels to find out his true cost of acquisition? Or is it just get a calculator?
Yeah, Peter, I honestly think that's it. I think the bringing in the idea of different channels kind of unnecessarily complicates it. It's one graph with 5 different lines, and your cost of acquisition is different for each line. And I think when you start to go into that process, that's when you start to see, how does the 30% from the OTAs match up with the other channels that I'm working on, right? Am I only spending 15% of a customer cost in Meta or search? And I think that will start to make it easier for you to make these determinations about how you spend your money. So I don't see the issue, and maybe I'm not reading the question correctly, but I don't see the issue in there having different channels because you should be measuring those channels separately. You can get some holistic, you can get a formula together to get at the end of the day what your acquisition costs, and I would say that's just revenue and marketing costs, right? Yeah. Simply put, but you can find a fancy formula to do that. But I think it's just simpler.
Simple. And I want to add to that within the platforms too, assuming that you have like conversion tracking set up and your POS system or your booking system connected to the platforms, it actually will do the math for you for each platform. And so you can run reports to see, okay, well, how did Meta, what's the acquisition cost, what's my conversion rate on Meta versus Google, like all that is done within the platform itself, which is really easy.
And then you can also feed that stuff into AI and just ask it the question. I think you'd be surprised at how efficient it can be. I know AI sometimes can be a little intimidating too, but it can be as simple as saying, hey, Gemini, here's my report from my Google advertising. Answer this question for me. And it will pull that information directly out of there for you. It'll also help you build spreadsheets like what John is talking about, where it'll feed that information directly into an ongoing spreadsheet. This is a whole other conversation. We probably don't have time for it today, but it's definitely something to look into that can help you with some of those challenges that just, I'm not a math person myself. So AI has become my friend.
I'm going to wrap up today's webinar with the last question from an operator in Mauritius. They've paid for Meta ads before and targeted the UK market. And I know the UK market to Mauritius is a strong market. I know that myself from being there before. They've received inquiries by doing that, but no bookings. They're now asking if I add my existing clients list in Meta, will the same clients be targeted or clients of a similar profile be targeted?
It depends on how you, once you've imported those, it depends on how you set up the advertising. So some of those things that Nick went through there, you can say, okay, here's my current list, and now I want a lookalike audience. So now you're not serving to your current customer list. Or you can say, yes, serve to my current customer list. It really depends on how you set that up once you've imported those audiences into the platform.
So it's basically
once you
do both.
Yeah, once you import them in, the world's your oyster as to what you can do with it.
Okay. Okay, Carla, Nick, and John, thanks very much for all that to do. This is a subject that you could literally talk about, or certainly I can talk about for hours on end, because it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And it is the number one, number two thing that our operators are interested in. How do we get more direct bookings? How do we make these bookings pay more that they're getting through? So thanks very much for all the input. If any of our operators are listening to this and they want to get in contact with you, how do they go about that?
The best way is to email me, john@datafy.com, JOHN. We're here and ready to help you make data-driven decisions to make your marketing budget go faster. So please feel free to reach out with any questions on things that we covered today or anything else that might be on your mind.
Excellent. Thanks very much, guys and girls. That was great. See you all soon.
Thanks, y'all.
Take care.